In business today, three things to know. First, it's the 5th birthday of the bull market run, and the jobs market may finally be coming to the party. We'll have the details of a strong February unemployment report and what it may mean. Then, pay up Ukraine. Russia demands $2 billion owed for natural gas as Russia and the West turn up the heat on each other. And a supermarket marriage between Safeway and Albertsons. Why this may just be the start of large grocery stores hooking up. A Rise Exchange for this Friday starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Late to the party, but maybe still planning to come. The story of the U.S. jobs market. The February unemployment report came in far better than expected, especially with all the negative economic news recently. The numbers, the rate did climb to 6.7%. But a deeper look shows improvement in the labor market, according to many economists. The Labor Department reporting that the economy added 175,000 jobs, better than the 129,000 estimate. Also, wages increased 0.4%. That might encourage the Federal Reserve to raise short-term interest rates at some point in order to control inflation, which so far is non-existent. So let's take a look at the numbers on Wall Street for how the markets reacted. The markets were up pretty decently in the early trading and then pulled back, up 30.83 to 16,452. The S&P 500, that's a record, up a point and a penny to 1878. The NASDAQ down 1590 to 4336. Taking a look at some stocks we're watching today. Thousands of Credit Suisse clients are in limbo waiting to see if their identities will be revealed as U.S. prosecutors work to resolve a 3-year probe on how the bank helped them evade paying taxes. Credit Suisse closing at 32.10, down 6 cents. Microsoft says it's counting on sales of its new game Titanfall, scheduled to be released on Tuesday to boost sales of its Xbox One game console. Sales of the new gaming systems dwindled drastically after its release last November. Microsoft down a quarter to $37.90. And H&R Block says the delayed opening of the Internal Revenue Service's e-file system is to blame for losses in its third quarter revenue. The U.S.-based tax preparation company posting revenue of $200 million and said another $277 million of revenue is being, quote, shifted into the fourth quarter as a result of the delay. H&R Block down 57 cents to 30.39. Taking a look at commodities, gold down 11.50 to 13.40. That's been pretty volatile this week due to the crisis in the Ukraine. And oil up a buck to 102.56. For more now on the job numbers and the outlook for the rest of the year, we turn to Chris Lowe, Chief Economist at FTN Financial. Chris, thank you for joining us here on the Rise Exchange. It's Friday.
Good to be here. Yeah.
So let me ask you about this 5-year bull market. It's pretty impressive numbers. The S&P 500 up some 200% on real returns. And apparently when the bull market started was about the most bearish people had been in history. Which would suggest that when that happens again, jump into the stock market.
Well, that's right. Look, it's been an incredible run. And what makes it almost more amazing is that small investors really didn't participate until about 6 months ago. They started legging in. So
is that true? They waited 4.5 years.
Absolutely. And, you wonder about those who got out near the bottom and missed most of that run. But now they are coming in, and that's one of the reasons you've got a little less volatility. The market's not as jumpy as it was because they tend to sit tight.
They're not traders.
That's right. And that money will continue to flow in. The other thing that's driving the market is share buybacks. We're seeing record numbers of companies buying back their own shares, financing with money that they borrowed at low interest rates thanks to the Fed.
Well, and that's a good question because then you wonder how artificial some of this bull run is when those interest rates start to rise and when companies do something other buying back. The earnings news was better, but we're still not seeing real earnings to the bottom line.
No, that's right. And look, a couple of things. When you look at the big sectors of the economy where debt grew during the Fed's quantitative easing bond buying program, it was corporate debt. And then you look at where that money went, it was buybacks. The last time we had buybacks this big was 2007. So that's definitely something you want to watch. But as long as it's still going on, and it is, that's positive momentum too.
So it is not too late to get into this bull market.
I don't think it is, and particularly when you have a pullback, like we had a pretty dramatic pullback in January, that I think is an opportunity. Typically, U.S. stocks, when they're rising, will continue to rise until the Fed raises rates, and I think that's some way off.
Well, let me ask you about that, because with the unemployment numbers looking like they did, there's some talk that there's wage pressure because wages are coming up. And so now they're saying, well, the Fed will have to raise interest rates because there could be inflation, though there really doesn't seem to be any signs of inflation. So you're in the camp that we're not going to see a rate hike.
Yeah, I would argue that's really, frankly, baloney. And by the way, what I ought to say is it's not the rate hike that signals time to get out. It's sort of the end of the tightening cycle. So that probably takes 2 years from, when you're tightening from zero. But
That's
look,
right.
There are Fed officials, Fed Presidents Plosser and Fisher and Lacker. So two of whom vote, all said we may have to raise rates soon. There are governors, Tarullo, Stein, who also have made sounds like maybe financial stability is more important than promoting job growth. That sounds like they want to raise rates as well. We have 2 new appointees who are going to have a nomination hearing next week. They should sail through, and that will give us perfectly equal balance between Janet Yellen and her colleagues who want to keep rates low, and the Fisher-Lacker wing that wants to raise rates.
And ultimately, Janet Yellen is the chair, and she has said it's unemployment that she's looking at.
Well, that's right. And she also has this tool in her back pocket, which is 250 PhD economists on the Fed staff who are very much in agreement that the Fed's priority has to be job creation right now.
Okay, Chris Lowe, chief economist at FTN Financial. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you. To the Ukraine, where Friday the Russian parliament said, take your best shot when it comes to sanctions. They don't scare us. Lawmakers voted to approve a plan in Crimea to vote on secession from the Ukraine and join Russia. At the moment, that referendum, which the Ukrainian government calls illegal, is scheduled for March 16th. The move prompted the U.S. and Western European countries to up the threat on sanctions to include asset freezes and broader visa and travel bans. Thousands of Russian troops are said to be in the peninsula of Crimea right now. Morgan Williams of the U.S.-Ukraine Business Council is in Kiev. We're going to talk to him about the impact on day-to-day businesses in the Ukraine and if anyone is feeling the pinch from sanctions. Morgan, thank you for joining us from Kiev today on the phone.
Thank you very much.
Let me ask you about the business climate and what that has been like for everyday businesses in the Ukraine over, let's say, the last 60 to 90 days as sort of this crisis has ramped up.
The business climate has been difficult, but most of the businesses that have been here for a long time know how to adjust, and they are adjusting and waiting until they see how this works out. But most of them are not getting ready to leave. This is a huge market.
Yeah, let me ask you about that adjustment. So what does that mean they adjust? There, had been some protests on the street, threat of violence. What can they do basically to, if it's just business as usual to the extent you can?
Well, many of them, of course, are watching the value of the hryvnia and making some adjustments there. They are mainly just running business day by day because most of Ukraine is pretty normal, and they're just keep continuing their operations, not expanding them, but just keep doing business day by day until they see how this thing comes out.
How are businesses feeling the pressure when it comes to how terrible the Ukrainian economy on the government side is, meaning that there's no money in the government coffers? What kind of pressure are they feeling?
The most pressure is coming from those who need operating credit or farms who need financing for this year's crop. The lending has basically stopped here from the international community, and the local banks don't have much money either. So mostly from a lending point of view, and they certainly hope, the international business community certainly hopes that the EU, United States, and IMF come up with a major financing package soon, which we think will take place. The new government has said they will agree to all of the requirements from the IMF. Can
you talk a little bit about what kind of business Ukrainian businesses do with Russia? and now the threat that Russia may cut them off. What kind of concerns are there?
Well, there's a lot of industrial products, a lot of steel, manufactured goods, actually quite a few food items that go to Russia, particularly from eastern Ukraine. That's been a threat that's been on and off for years. Ukraine is going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to move the new government forward and hope that the EU and the United States could put enough pressure on Russia that if there was an embargo, it wouldn't last too long.
Well, I was going to ask you.
Embargoes put pain both ways, and so Russia probably could not keep up that embargo too long.
Well, that's my question for you. I imagine most businesses are for some sanctions, but it's a waiting game. Neither country has huge financial strength. So where do businesses come down on the issue of sanctions? What do they want to see happen, and how long can they outlast Russia?
Well, businesses, of course, international businesses, of course, were totally in favor of Ukraine signing the agreement with the EU at Vilnius. They're totally in agreement of an IMF plan, and they want stability, and they do not want Ukraine to be borrowing all their money from Russia. We know that goes on and off. And so the business community is betting that a EU agreement will be signed hopefully in the next 60 to 90 days, and also a major financing package will be put in place from the West.
Well, let me ask you that because Ukraine owes Russia a lot of money right now. Is there worry in the business community that the EU and maybe the U.S. is going to give Ukraine some money, and that's going to help Ukraine pay their debts to Russia?
Well, they're going to have to pay those debts some way. There may be some restrictions on the money from the West, but Ukraine, of course, will have some money of its own that it can use to pay those debts. The main concern is other international debts and to keep the government moving forward. So I think actually everybody involved in the West understands that and understands that's a part of what Ukraine is going to do, and they will not do they won't do something that's not very smart that causes Ukraine to default.
Okay, Morgan Williams in Kiev. Good luck to you, sir, and please come back soon.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, Russia demands cash from Ukraine, but the country has no money. We'll talk about the impact of the crisis on the emerging markets. You're watching Arise Exchange. Because we live in a global, interconnected world, business news no longer stops when the markets close on Wall Street. And what we've discovered over the past few years in the financial crisis is that events and news that happen even in the smallest countries impact the United States and the world at large. As we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs and companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use.
Arise News is a different kind of network. We are able to tell our own stories, and we're able to cover stories in a way that other media outlets don't do. We've got world-class journalists, veteran journalists who have been in this industry for decades, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. Arise News is a place where we can tell stories in an interesting, factual, inclusive way like no one else in the business can.
As the crisis in the Ukraine intensifies, what kind of impact is it having on markets across the globe? Brian Jacobsen is the chief portfolio strategist with Wells Fargo Funds Management, joins us from Milwaukee. Brian, welcome back to Arise Exchange.
Thanks for having me back.
So Russia wants its $2 billion in gas money back. Is it going to get it? I mean, Ukraine, even when they search the couches of their former leader in that opulent palace, they don't have $2 billion, do they?
No, and that's one of the problems is Ukraine really doesn't have the money, and this debt is really a product of years and years of cronyism and corruption that took place at the higher levels in the Ukrainian government. However, I do think that they are going to make good on this debt. Just to put it into perspective, this is a debt that the Ukrainian government owes to Gazprom, so it is a state-owned enterprise in Russia, but it is for natural gas that has already been purchased. And I think that the Ukrainian government wants to make good on this this debt so that they don't give a reason or an excuse to the Russian government to cut off the gas supplies, even on a temporary basis, to the people of Ukraine.
Yeah, certainly, and that is the risk there. Is there concern that when the U.S. and EU provide Ukraine with money, that is going to go right away to Russia, and maybe that's not a bad thing?
You know, that is a good question. I mean, there is this perception that if they do, if the United States or the EU steps in and helps out Ukraine, this is just basically going to pad the wallets of the Russian government or Russian bankers. And really, I think a better way to think about this is that Ukraine wants to maintain their legitimacy as far as being a good credit risk, and so they want to make good on their debt. So this is more of a refinancing. It's not as though this is really new money that has to go to the Russian government. It's just stepping, having better funding step in the place of what could be perceived as bad funding from the Russian government.
Let me ask you about the Russian stock market. It has not liked what Vladimir Putin is doing in the Ukraine. Does Putin himself care about the stock market? Because if we got that kind of hit here in the U.S., it would put some significant political pressure on the leadership.
Absolutely, and I think that in the United States, we saw that with during the financial crisis with like the vote on TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. When that was voted down the first time, the market dropped significantly, and suddenly the people in the House of Representatives had a change of heart as far as whether or not they should approve that. I don't think that Vladimir Putin is subject to the same type of pressure. A big reason is that he's, number one, you have the situation where the amount of equity ownership in Russia isn't as large as it is in the United States. And so Putin is more concerned about his popularity. So the first thing is really a move in the stock market isn't going to affect his popularity that much because it doesn't really hurt a lot of people in the pocketbooks. Number two, Putin really, he wants power. And in order to have power, he just needs to stay popular. So his big concern isn't necessarily the stock market so much as it is the financial system.
And the
One
oligarchs.
of the things that we could and the oligarchs,
That's right.
absolutely. And that's actually where some of these like visa bans and that can really begin to bite because these oligarchs really won't be able to travel internationally if the U.S. has these visa bans and if that's actually imposed, say, by the European Union as well.
Brian, let me ask you about the emerging markets. They certainly don't need help in having trouble. Are other emerging markets sort of seeing what's going on in the Ukraine, and are they feeling any impact?
You know, I think that the other emerging markets, if you sort of visualize it as though what happened was you took a rock and just threw it into a pond and how it creates all those waves. It creates that big splash in the middle, and then you have waves that propagate out from that. And that's kind of what the market reaction was like. It hit like a rock the Russian market as being down about 10% on Monday, and then it actually propagated on out. You saw the Poland market down, so some of the emerging Europe market declined, but it really began to dissipate after that, because I think people were recognizing, at least in the investing community, that this isn't going to have a direct effect on a lot of the emerging markets as far as the profitability of the businesses that you invest in. One area where it does affect is in the energy market, because all of a sudden you get all sorts of distortions with like the price of oil and the price of gas, natural gas. So it's had a differential effect, but for the most part, the emerging market space has held up pretty well.
Okay, Brian Jacobsen with Wells Fargo Funds Management. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. You too.
Time now for our business ticker. The U.S. trade gap widened slightly in January, according to the Commerce Department. The trade deficit increased to $39.1 billion, up 0.3% from December. A rise in imports of oil and other foreign goods offset a $193 billion increase in exports, led by sales of U.S.-made machinery, aircraft, and medical equipment. Ford Motors has announced it's moving production from Mexico to the U.S. The automaker says it will build its Ford F-650 and Ford F-750 pickup trucks at its plant in Avon Lake, Ohio, starting early next year. The move honors an agreement Ford made with the United Auto Workers in 2011 and will preserve 1,600 jobs at that factory. The company says it's investing $168 million to make the change. And it's the latest step to ease restrictions on women in combat roles as the U.S. Army opens field artillery jobs to women. The directive will open 1,900 positions in the active duty Army and 1,700 in the Guard and Reserve. The goal is part of an ongoing campaign to eliminate policies that have barred women from serving in combat units below the brigade level. And the man who was unmasked as the mysterious inventor of Bitcoin says it's not him. Within hours of Newsweek's cover story claiming that the creator of Bitcoin was Dorian Nakamoto, formerly known as Satoshi Nakamoto. Nakamoto denied the Newsweek story. He gave this interview to the Associated Press. Nakamoto, who is 64 years old, also said he had never heard of Bitcoin until his son told him he had been contacted by a reporter 3 weeks ago. Meanwhile, the user named Satoshi Nakamoto, who posted one of the original descriptions of Bitcoin on a web forum when it was launched in 2009, has penned a new one-sentence post reading simply, quote, "I am not Dorian Nakamoto." Newsweek is standing by its story. Ahead, the family that shoplifts together stays together. Our favorite person of the day, next.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
The great thing about Arise Entertainment 360 is that we cover the 360 of entertainment, food, fashion, lifestyle, culture. We're able to cover it all. And the thing I love most about the show is we're able to do a stunning combination of high and low. So we can talk about Rihanna on the red carpet, but we can also speak about high art with people like Sanford Biggers and Hank Willis. We actually spend quality time with our guests and we really get to know them. It's really intriguing because we get a 360 look at our guests.
Time now for our favorite person, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, it is Branko Bogdanov and his family who managed to pull off a $7 million 10-year shopping spree without paying for any of it. Prosecutors say the three members of the Illinois family shoplifted millions of dollars of toys, electronics, and other stuff without anyone finding out. And they allegedly got away with it because the mother hid the goods under her giant black dress and then just walked right out of the stores, one after another. Branko, Lela, and Julia Bogdanov are accused of shoplifting the items and then selling many of them on eBay. After more than 10 years, the shoplifting scheme began to fall apart when investigators at Barnes & Noble and Toys R Us finally noticed huge amounts of items missing with no one paying for them. Then prosecutors got an accomplice to turn on them. The family was busted when they returned to their Northbrook, Illinois home after a trip to Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana, which was allegedly a working vacation because they're accused of stealing even more items. If convicted, they face 10 years in jail. But surprisingly, Branko Bogdanov's attorney says his client is very upset about his circumstances and very upbeat about his future. So, for perfecting the five-finger discount, Branko Bogdanov and his family are our favorite people of the day. Next, merger in aisle 3. A huge supermarket merger may mean more to come. You're watching Arise Exchange.
Arise serves underserved communities by bringing them news, information, sports, and entertainment from places that are becoming part of the world economy, that are becoming a part of the world voice, and decisions that are affecting things in the world that people care about. They care about the economy. They care about safety and security. And if you come to Arise and you watch our broadcast, these are the things we're going to bring to you every day, 24 hours a day.
One of the great things about Arise Entertainment 360 is we have this Arise to Your Health segment, which really focuses on the holistic approach of being healthy. So we do everything from working out to juicing to getting in shape by doing fun exercises like bouncing on a trampoline or wearing these bouncy boots on our feet when we're jumping all over the set. We've done karate, we've danced the weight off, we've done just about everything. And of course, I love when we eat on set, but we do it in a very healthy and clean way.
Big supermarket deal today. Private equity firm Cerberus struck a $9 billion deal to purchase grocery store chain Safeway. There are about 1,600 Safeway stores in the U.S. and Canada. Cerberus already owns Albertsons, which operates 1,000 stores in 12 distribution centers in the U.S. The deal Looks to be a good one for Cerberus, but what will it mean for shoppers? So let's ask Tom Perko, president of BevMark Consultants in the food and beverage industry. Tom, welcome back to Arise Exchange. Glad you're here with us.
Thank you.
So let me ask you.
First, do you have the, yeah, sure. I just wanted to ask you, do you have a phone number for that shoplifting family? I think we have some jobs for them. Yeah.
Well, they may be tied up for 10 years or so.
They're pretty good at what they do. But we can wait. We can wait. So, yeah.
The key is she put it under her big dress.
But you want to talk about supermarkets.
Let's talk about supermarkets,
right, yeah,
and hopefully not a lot of shoplifting going on for Albertsons and Safeway. Were you surprised by this deal, and what does it really mean? It's how does this help both companies?
No, we weren't surprised at all. I think there's some indigestion and maybe some heartburn right now in the industry. There's been a massive consolidation going on for a long time in the supermarket industry, and for a very good reason. Maybe in a way, the whole concept of a supermarket doesn't make a lot of sense. Too many products, too much space, too many employees. And if you're surrounded by the giants in the industry, people like Walmart or Target or Costco, how do you compete when you have that kind of overhead? So I think between the big stores hammering these chains and all the specialty stores, even the dollar stores,
and you're talking about some of the higher,
like a viable business.
And Tom, you're talking about some of the higher end stores, for example, like a Whole Foods maybe, and as well as some of the discount stores like Trader Joe's are squeezing these guys.
They're surrounded. It's like they're circling the wagons because you've got Costco out there. As I said, you've got Walmart, you've got Target, you've got Whole Foods, you've got Trader Joe. You have people now shopping in the dollar stores just simply because they think they get better value.
Well, I'll
so
tell
the whole
you,
concept of a supermarket,
I'll tell you, here in Manhattan, we had a food emporium on the corner of Broadway that was here as long as I was alive. Vanished one day. So maybe there's something to that there's a lot of pressure on here. So now we're going to see more consolidations. You say that this is giving heartburn to the industry. Why?
Well, they just can't figure out the economics. And I think when you have this kind of consolidation, you have to always pause and say, who will step in? Okay. Who will really master the business? And the answer is obviously Kroger. Kroger is in the position to be maybe the only one company who can consolidate everything and make the costs work. Let me, whether or not they get, go ahead.
No,
Antitrust issues are important here, but right.
Well, let me ask you something, because when on the consumer side, does bigger mean better for the consumers in that they could more control their costs and drive down the products like Walmart, for example, had done for decades, or is it worse for consumers?
That's a classic antitrust issue. Is the consumer going to benefit? Short term, I think they always do, because I think there's a big push on after any deal to make a good showing of it. Long term, you lessen competition, you know what happens. It's real simple.
Cerberus will take these companies, and maybe one day what they do is they obviously at some point maybe want to IPO them. Is that a possibility here?
I kind of doubt it. It's a troubled industry. There are too many shadows. I think we're just looking at another transaction, and not far away. As I said, if you look at how these industries are structured and how they really compete economically, you're just looking at Cincinnati. You're looking at Kroger staring down at them, and it really is the only, I think, one company who can pull it all together and manage the industry.
All right, let me ask you about sort of the family-style restaurants. Red Lobster, these are Darden-owned companies, filing for bankruptcy. Red Lobster has a lot of problems out there. What are some of them, and can Red Lobster survive?
I'm sorry to be smiling, but I think you should wear a bib when you go to Red Lobster. They have all kinds of issues. What happened here is consumers finally became aware of the fact that when they thought they were getting great value, probably the only thing in the kitchen was a microwave. A lot of food was being prepared out and then just
well, there's been complaints that the food is just not very good. That's the problem, right? The food is not very good.
Well, it's just like the supermarket industry and the squeeze that I mentioned with other competitors. In the restaurant business, what's happened is you have fast food, which has actually gotten better. It's still much less expensive. You can pick up almost anything prepared in a good supermarket now. And then you have a whole bunch of restaurants who actually prepare the food. And you may pay slightly more, but you get better quality. So what is the concept
and maybe
of
as the
these
economy,
restaurant chains?
And we have about 20 seconds. Tom, we have 20 seconds left.
Yeah.
I guess as the economy improves, there's a flight to quality for consumers?
I think psychologically, yes. And I think the whole value proposition of the restaurant chains that we're talking about just is beginning to slip. There's just a better place to eat and still get a very good deal.
Okay, Tom Perko, president of BevMark. Appreciate it.
I want the number of that shoplifting family.
Next week on Xchange, we may have to give it to everybody at this point. Don Peebles, the largest African-American real estate developer in the U.S., stops by to tell us about his new deal and why he's poised to make history in the U.S. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Xchange. We will see you here on Monday.